Has a story that I love. So I mentioned that a little over a year ago I quit my job, I left cubicle land, and I've been doing this full-time online thing. And I worked really hard to have a landing pad when I left my job, so I was working as a side hustle. But our next speaker worked as a news reporter here in the Los Angeles area, and when you work for the news, you're not allowed to have a side hustle. And I don't know if you could anyway, because you don't sleep with that job and you're always getting ready for the next story. So ladies and gentlemen, it helps when my clicker's turned on. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next speaker, Mandy.
Hello. All right, so as you said, I'm Mandy. I'm going to be talking about the art of the interview. And I've been a broadcast journalist and TV news reporter for the last 10 years, most recently here at CBS Los Angeles. And I've interviewed thousands of people ranging from CEOs and celebrities to just everyday people on the street. So I'm going to give you my 3 top tips for a great interview. Number 1 seems like the easiest, but are you really implementing it? Keep it simple. Number 2, don't be afraid to go off script. And number 3, let it breathe. And I'll explain why it's okay for that one to feel awkward in just a little bit. But first, let's start with number 1. Keep it simple. This can be the most important one. You don't want to lose your audience to boredom or confusion. Or have you ever listened back to your tape and said, "Shut up already" to yourself? Keep it simple. I like to say, don't be a White House correspondent. If you've ever watched those press briefings, no matter who's at the podium these days, the reporters tend to ask 2 or 3 questions, and they're these long, drawn-out questions, and they never get a straight answer. So keep it to 1 question, and a lot of times the best question is just short. So why? Tell me more. How did you react? Those are often the best questions that get the most powerful answers when you use them appropriately. So stop yourself if you find yourself rambling. Just stop yourself. A lot of people explain why they're asking a question, so before they actually ask the question, they say, I'm curious this, and I'm asking because blah, blah, blah. A lot of times your audience doesn't care, they just want to hear the answer. Focus on the person you're interviewing. So I get it that the beauty of podcasts is they are often a more long form than maybe TV news, but you still have to find that balance between casual chat and simple and focused so your audience stays engaged with what you're talking about. All right, so number 2, don't be afraid to go off script. I can't tell you how many times I've walked into an interview thinking I knew exactly how it was going to go, and then they say something totally different, and I throw my questions over my shoulder. Because that's how you get a unique interview, is by going off script. So yes, do your research, make sure you have questions in mind or on a notepad, but don't just stare at your notepad and not pay attention to the interview. Be ready to change course. So I like to think of it as you are the compass guiding them through the interview. They are the hiker. They are doing most of the talking, so they're carrying the weight of the interview, just like the hiker does. And if they want to take a detour, guess what? You can go with them, especially if it's an interesting detour. And the best way to go off script appropriately is to make sure you're listening to what they actually say. So again, don't just be staring at your next question on your notepad. Listen to them. You'll make sure you avoid repeating them, and you'll avoid missing a great follow-up question that your audience is actually really interested in, and they might be wondering if you don't get to it. All right, so number 3, let it breathe. And this one can feel awkward. Feels awkward when I don't say anything, right? A couple people chuckled. You feel like you kind of have to fill that gap. Well, that's the point. The person you're interviewing may feel like they need to fill that gap. And so if they're holding something back, they may blurt it out. And that's what's going to make your interview stand out. So often when you use this tactic appropriately, and it's not appropriate all the time, but you can get one more great emotion or one more great thought that you otherwise would not have gotten because you're willing to be a little awkward and just not say anything for a few seconds. There was one example in the part 1 of the HBO's documentary, The Defiant Ones. If anyone's seen it, I do recommend it. Dr. Dre's pretty timid at first, but he's given the space to finish his thought, and he ends up saying some really interesting stuff. So that's just one example. The other thing that this tactic of just being quiet for a few seconds can do is let a powerful moment soak into your audience's brain. And it can be really powerful to just make that one moment stand out in your interview with some silence. So if, for example, if someone says, "And that was the moment I knew I was going to marry him," and how did your family react? See how it just makes it stand out a little bit when you give it that space? You don't have to jump in with your question as soon as they stop talking. And that tactic especially takes practice. You don't want to use it all the time. Maybe it's not right for every podcast or every interview, but when you're looking for something a little deeper, a little bit more, just notice how other people use it and practice using it. It will eventually start to feel natural. So to recap, number 1, keep it simple. Most important, hardest to implement. Number 2, go off script. Don't be afraid to change course. And number 3, let it breathe. And it's okay if you feel a little bit awkward on that one. Thank you so much. I'm Erica Mandy. I just launched my podcast, The Newsworthy. One word, The Newsworthy. It gives you all the day's news in less than 10 minutes, so check it out. Thanks so much.